So this is an orientation to patient IQ, and just to get you up and running with the basic functionality of the system. So on the home screen, you can navigate to the home screen either by going to your browser and typing in PatientIQ login, or by navigating there through Epic through one of your patients. So if I click on the icon, it would take me to this page, and we're going to go through each of these tabs in turn. So on the home screen, you're going to have projects. Likely you'll only have one project. In future, you may have more. The project that we as a clinic put all of our patients into is the rehabilitation pathway. From here, we can see that we can click on a dashboard of the project, which gives us a very high level overview of the project on the whole. Again, we'll go through this in detail together or at a future time point. For all intents and purposes, this will be important when we go into the data and the analytics tabs. The settings and the tasks don't necessarily apply to you directly, but it's good information to just orient yourself to so that you can understand the home page. So you will have projects, the total number of enrolled patients in said projects, cumulative, so this is aggregate across all 5, the patients that have enrolled in the last 30 days and how that percentage has changed, and then tasks completed in the last 30 days and how we are doing on the whole. As again, it's an aggregate of all the projects combined. Next tab is going to be the patient tab. So if you click on that, it's going to bring you to a screen such as this, which is going to allow you to put in a variety of different filters to be able to select the patient in question. If I didn't put in these filters, I would see all the patients across all 5 projects. If I wanted to only look at the rehab pathway, I would simply just click on that and apply. If I only wanted to look on my patients within that pathway, I would click provider, I would click my name, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to do it just because it's going to change the patients that we see here. You could do time points as far as like the number of days post-op. The tasks, I usually don't use that filter. It's usually these first couple, as well as putting in the actual name of the patient, either first or last name. Again, I've used the filters of test such that we are HIPAA compliant and we only see example of test patients here. As we bring our attention down to the information that we see, so looking across the top row, we can see the different columns. So you have the patient name, the pathway that they, or the project they're part of, whether they're active or they've been discontinued or discharged. Oftentimes there'll be a provider associated with that, as well as a location. You can see this is rehab for the occupational hand therapy, or outpatient hand therapy, I should say. And then you have the intervention date, which is if they had a surgical procedure, and then the offset, that is how many days out they are from that. The patient tasks, do they have anything outstanding? A check means that they're good. And then clinical forms, you can see that this patient in particular has one outstanding form or one that is in progress that hasn't been submitted. Ideally, you want to see a green check mark such as this. And this patient, this test patient just doesn't have any status of any sort, and that's why you see it blank across the board. And keep in mind that these are just test patients, thus there's gaps of the data that's filling out the different rows and columns respectively. Okay, moving on to the calendar. So just gonna block that. So for the calendar view, here it's going to be similar to what you saw in the patient, but then you can toggle it by day. So if you wanted to see what your, who's on your schedule for a given day, or if someone has dropped off, this is another way that you can navigate through this. especially because sometimes you just get an open slot in Epic. You don't necessarily know who it was if you don't get a CRM. So you could come through and you can see that I have two 11 o'clocks, two 12:45s, two 1:30s. And so over the course of history, people have either scheduled and dropped off. And you can see there's the status here of who's canceled and who actually arrived. So if we go down each column, you have the time, if they're scheduled, the patient, the provider, which would be me. So if I move this over, you'll see my name. And then you have the clinic, the visit type, whether they're a return or new patient, their visit status, again, whether it be canceled or arrived, and then the projects they're associated with. Again, some of these patients are in multiple projects. Forms, if I click on this, I could potentially view the forms of that patient. I'm not going to do that just from a compliance standpoint. And then you have the outstanding tasks. So I can see that this gentleman and this person also have outstanding tasks. So I could click on those and next time that they're in clinic or when they are in clinic and address those outstanding tasks. Some of those outstanding tasks may not, keep in mind, may not be associated with any of our pathways because this is on a institutional scale. So the task would apply, outstanding task could apply across multiple pathways. And then here you could generate a kiosk code, send email reminder for this patient, or enroll this patient in a project in particular. Same filters that you had on the patient tab. So you either have projects, you have visit type. So it would look like this, where you have the different projects. The visit type would be, again, you would have to scroll down to the rehab, new or return, the tasks, whether they have outstanding or others, and then the visit status, either arrived or canceled, and so on. The clinic, and then the clinic type. I usually, again, only use the first couple of filters and or just searching the patient specifically. You can also toggle this again by the calendar date. The final tab is going to be reports. Now on the report tab, it's going to show you the executive summary right now. Up and coming is going to be the provider scorecard. I've given an example here. So this is going to be the outcome module provider scorecard. This is for all providers because I haven't added any filters, but if I wanted to, so the project name again would be rehab pathway. I'd select that. And then if I wanted to put in a provider, for example, it would be myself, and I would add that filter and I'd click apply. This then would give me my metrics over the last several months, specifically 6 months looking back. I could toggle that if I needed to. So you can see the patient reported outcome scores measured all time, and then the patient reported outcome scores measured in the last 90 days and how my status has trended. The interventions tracked, and then the actual interventions tracked over the last 90 days as well. So it gives you a trajectory. You can see that some months have been better than others, but on the whole, more recently, I've been in an uptick. And then this looks at baseline compliance, how many of them have been consistent within the 83% of them on initial intake have been consistent. We've since put in workflow, so this will continue to improve, and you can see that has indeed improved in the last couple of months. And then 1 year post-op compliance, the last 90 days. Again, there's no results here, presumably because those patients are no longer with us at 1 year. And then this would give me my 1 year post-op compliance at 6 months. Okay, and so that's the dashboard and the 4 predominant tabs. Additionally, what you have in the upper bar is you can search directly for a particular patient. I'll show you that as an example in a moment. Sometimes you will, in some cases, depending on what prior privileges have been granted to you via PatientIQ. You can hit healthcare providers, organizational settings, but you likely will not be able to manipulate these necessarily unless you ask for specific permissions, but I don't foresee that being necessary at this time. And then obviously if I needed to go in and switch my own personal preferences as a provider and in my own login for PatientIQ, I could do that. For instance, you could see like switching to the dark theme and or if you click on my preferences, you can set your or reset your authorization and so on and so forth. But again, not necessary at the moment or for the purpose of this video. All right, so then if we're going to use an example here, right, I'll use my own name. It doesn't have to be the full name. I could just type in a portion of my name and I would likely capture that. Okay, so I clicked on my name. All right, so then this brings you to an individual patient. So in the patient profile, you have 6 tabs. So one is similar to the project overview that we saw on the software from the beginning. In the progress tab, we have just a high-level overview of the patient on the whole. While the latest scores are still populating, I'll show you, just kind of orient you to. So in a moment, this will populate the latest scores that are taken by the patient. In the timeline below, you can select several things. So if I wanted to see the actual visits, you can see that it's automatic. Everything's automatically highlighted essentially. But if I did not want to see the visits, in a moment I'll show you an example where the visits become quite busy, where you see multiple blue lines or bars. If I click that, they'll take it away. You can see when the enrollment date was, when the initial form was taken, and I could take that away as well. Additionally, you can see the across the bottom is that this spans from like last October, yeah, essentially from the initial intake to, yeah, so it's like from 10/23 23 to 12/17, but sometimes this is going to be extensive, especially if they have multiple encounters or multiple enrollment dates. And then if that's the case, you can always slide this such that it's not you're not looking across all of history, just for a select time frame that is more relevant. You can see more meaningful changes, especially if if I had filled out the outcome measures at multiple time points. Then right now it's all selected interventions. If there were other interventions, for instance, I had multiple dates, had been enrolled in physical therapy on multiple occasions, then I could toggle this and it would drop off the other interventions that were applied. Additionally, I can toggle, similar to the visits and the enrollment date here would be if I did not want to see the patient, the PSFS, I could just click this, or if I didn't care about the falls risk, and that would only show me the lower extremity functional scale. Here's a better example of a patient. So you can see that this is a patient that was seen by one of our prior residents, and it's a better example. At least you have 2 data points of the outcome measures and how that has trended. So you can see the multiple visits. We could take those away by clicking that, and then you're left only with the enrollment date and then the change in the progress of the ACEs score going from 70 to 75, and then the patient-specific functional scale going from 5, 4, and 3 to 7, 7, and 6. Intensity of pain is at 3, and it started at 3. So there's no change in the pain here. And then if I scroll down, I could also toggle, again, just a more specified time point if I needed to. I could also just say, well, I don't really care about the falls risk in this patient because it really hasn't changed, and then focus in on that. Additionally, if I wanted to come up here and say, well, I'm interested in how this patient has trended against all of my patients or against other patients. So right now it's just comparing it against all. So if I come in here and I click, for instance, if I click verse myself, maybe it's not. So you select the provider. Again, it could be just you or it could be against other therapists. And then you click on the individual outcome measure. It's going to populate and show you that this patient was how it compared relative to my norm, and it would be like right smack dab on the median. I also have the opportunity to select multiple. So say if I selected say Robin, for instance, and then I could also select it maybe in the last, I don't know, in the last 30 days, then that would also apply. And you can see how the scores have changed over time. Okay, and so on the patient portal or profile, that's essentially how you would toggle through the latest scores. You can see what pathway that they're in, whether they're active or not. You can see the most recent scores there and click on them, compare them versus either all patients or your patients or specific clinicians. And then I've already described how to look at the timeline below. Moving from the progress to the engagement. So the engagement tab just tells you essentially whether how consistent this patient has been. I don't find this as valuable as some of the other tabs here. Really, when I look at forms, that's going to tell me all that I need to see. Specifically, I think in part because it really shows you, I would have to filter by that as far as the pathway is concerned. And it doesn't, like, I've never been assigned the quick dash per se. You can see the due dates for the different, the more recent outcome measures that have been assigned. And then the correspondence of when it has been sent. But again, I don't make a lot of meaningful inferences from this page. The forms is going to be an important tab for you. So specifically, or just orienting you, so you have two panels. You have left-hand panel, small, which lists all the patient-reported outcomes forms that you can designate to the patient, as well as the clinical forms. Clinical forms are those that are filled out by you as the clinician versus the patient-reported outcome forms that are filled out by the patient. And you can either assign this, and and so if I was going to assign a task, I would come up here, I'd hit assign task. I'd specify which project it was associated with and say I wanted them to fill out an LEFS. You can either customize the message or use the default, and then I would assign the task, and that would immediately send it to the patient. You can also, in the settings tab, and I'll come back to the forms here in a moment, but I can see like whether they've, like what's their primary form of enrollment and where whether they have an email address on file. And you can see that in this case, I'm eligible on both accounts. Additionally, I have the if there's multiple patients, you could potentially merge patients, and then you could also enroll them in a subsequent project. Again, I don't foresee that being necessary at this time, but this is where you would do that. You could also do it directly through the Actions tab. If you needed to enroll them for some reason, there are times where the patient isn't enrolled yet within the rehab pathway. And that's how, so if you notice that, then that's how you would do it. Okay. And then all the forms that are under the rehabilitation pathway are shown here. So the way the PatientIQ software works is that though there are a multitude of forms within their database, a patient can't access all of them. They can only access or be designated the forms that are within that said pathway that the patient is enrolled in. So the forms that the patient always gets, they always get this rehab therapy form. And when you click on that, that's the one that you're seeing here. In this case, it would be the form as the patient would fill out what their chief complaint is, and that would toggle. They would, if they, for instance, said they had hip pain, then they would be, depending on the type of hip pain, they would be given an LEFS or a Hagos and so on and so forth. I believe this first column is the one that they are given. If they say that they have knee pain, for instance, they will automatically get a LEFS. They won't, though these other ones, such as the Hagos, HOOS, the IHOT, the IKDC, KOOS, are all available. They aren't the first go-to for that body region. It's just the first one. Okay. And then when the resident section, this is going to be important. So this needs to be filled out. The patient will not fill this out. You will fill this out. In fact, this is like the primary means by which we track how many patients of a particular diagnosis and body region that you see. So say that, depending on the diagnosis of the patient, you would come in and click the appropriate diagnosis. And then at the bottom, you would come in after you've clicked on what is appropriate. You would hit save in progress, and you can see that this one, in this case, the body region that was being treated was the hip. If there is multiple, say you are treating their hip and their knee, and you would click obviously both. And this is oftentimes filled out by the patient or toggled based off the patient's response. You should also note that if you end up evaluating them for their shoulder, but it's really a cervical radic, then you need to come in and you need to identify that you're treating both of those, if they're both related to the condition, presumably. At the end of the encounter, so the number of visits within the episode, you would come in and you would also specify, once that patient has been otherwise discharged, you would come in and you specify the number of visits. This is also a section where you can put reflective notes about this patient, either lessons learned or otherwise. Though you don't have to do that here, it does provide a nice location in which you can keep a running library of notes on the subsequent patients beyond just in Epic, of course. Once you've done that and you've made your changes, you need to hit submit, or at the very least save in progress. The submit, I would recommend this the save in progress for the time being. That will allow you to determine that you need to come back and fill out some, like for instance, the number of visits in the episode. If you do submit it, don't fret about it. You can always come back in at a future time point. For instance, this one, you can see the little green symbol suggests that it has been submitted, and so I can still come back in and edit it. Okay, then the inpatient intake form will then populate, and this is where the patient would fill out their history of present illness, pain assessment, and you would essentially copy and paste and verbatim take this information and put it into Epic. But this is where probably where most of the therapists spend the majority of their time these days at Current is extracting this information ahead of the patient coming in. Of note, if the patient is scheduled within 2 weeks of the date of their initial encounter, then they probably won't have these forms unless they fill them out ahead of time, like specifically when they arrive, because the system will send out the forms 2 weeks in advance of their scheduled date. So they will miss that trigger if they're scheduled within 2 days, or excuse me, 2 weeks of that. If you ever want to download a form and you wanted to either print it off and or share it, you could do so by creating a PDF that may be relevant for some of the clinical forms specifically. I'll show you those in a moment. But yeah, so that's how you could make a PDF and download it, and if you needed to send it off to a physician, etc. Okay, and then obviously the outcome forms themselves, so you can see that everyone fills out a PSFS, and then of note with the PSFS is that it doesn't, unlike some of the other forms, will have to manually do this because it doesn't trigger them to redo it again in every 30 days. All the other forms will, and the reason why we have that in place is because as of current, the activity will not carry over to the next session, or excuse me, to the next time point in which they fill that out. Of note, you will need to come in and create a form, right? And usually it's best done at the episode of care rather than sending it off. I could, again, assign a task as I showed you, or I could also just pull this up right on my computer and have the patient fill it out, or fill it out with them together. And then I could hit submit. In this case, I'm not going to do any of that because it's just an example. Okay. And then if you needed to look at the LEFS, you can see the date at which it was created. Once again, I could create a new form. Usually we take the raw score rather than the traditional, rather than the percentage score. Usually the metadata fields, you don't need to fill that out unless you manually put it in. But that would be essentially the patient forms. The clinician forms are you can see the examples currently that we've populated have been really around the return to sport workflow that we've tried to establish. So, for example, return to sport day 1, if I was going to hit create, I would come in, I would do the date of the assessment would be today, then the visit number that you're taking this on. You can see our return to sport for the knee is range of motion, wide balance, and isokinetic testing. I would do right. I would put in the patient information. What are the things that I'm going to be doing today? I'm going to take the knee range of motion. I'm going to take the effusion. And then we don't have time for the wide balance, so I'm just going to do these things of the isokinetic. And I'm only going to do 60 and 180. I'm not going to do 300. And you would come in and you would put in this information. And then you would hit submit. Say you wanted to use this form just for the Y balance and nothing else, you could just come in and click the Y balance, even though they may not be returning to sport. That would allow you to leverage this form, this clinical form or clinician reported outcome here pretty readily and easily. And then I would, after I submitted this, I could come in and download it or print it like I did. And then beyond the scope of this conversation, at least in the purpose of this video, but you could also do the lower extremity return to sport, additional test, and or the FLE if and when it comes time and appropriate. If for some reason you also have additional pathways, they would populate here. And then if there's unlinked forms, specifically because in this case I had filled these out, but unfortunately didn't actually attend the session and such, that they weren't directly linked to the rehab pathway or any intervention. Yeah, so the forms is really going to be one of the main tabs, and then for the records, if you have if there are any e-consents or files that you do want to upload, you can do so by simply scanning and or dropping them here and uploading them to the profile. The visits will show you all the visits that the individual had attended. That's an easy way for you to go back to your initial intake form and populate it. Just keep in mind that you don't want to just take the number at the bottom, right? You would need to potentially filter this by the ones that are arrived, right? So there's only 2 here. And you could easily toggle that status such that it populated like that. And then the settings tab I've already shown. I'll show it once more. This is really just the patient's demographics, contact information, what their preferred means of getting the forms from PatientIQ. And then if you need to enroll them in a pathway or associate them with a particular healthcare provider, such as maybe you have a patient that transfers from someone else to you or vice versa, you could add the provider and disassociate the other provider. And that really kind of takes you through the different tabs of the patient profile.